Hey, what's up? This is Harry Wagner from Harry Situations, and I'm here to talk to you today about the YJ Wrangler. So the YJ was the first Wrangler. It was introduced in 1987. Prior to that, Jeep made the CJ, civilian Jeep, and it ran through 1995. This is a Jeep that I did not give a lot of love to when I made my video about the best Jeep of all time. Sorry, not sorry. The YJ when it came out was terrible. I'll be quite honest with you. It had a 258 engine that had a carburetor on it and a mile of smog lines and vacuum lines. They came with a Peugeot transmission that if you sneezed hard, they would break, and an MP207 transfer case with basically zero aftermarket support. The axles were a low pinion Dana 30 in the front and a Dana 35 in the back that was just as weak as that transmission. They used C-clip axle shafts, tiny ring and pinions, tiny carriers, and the housings like the Flex. They also have a 5-on-4.5 bolt pattern. They got rid of the locking hubs in the front, but CJ locking hubs weren't great. They used external studs, and those weren't the best anyway. As the Jeep Wrangler YJ continued through the years, it did get better. So they got rid of the MP207 after 1 year. And then in 1991, they came out with the 4-liter engine that had been used in the Cherokee and endured through the TJ lineup. So these engines, same inline 6-cylinder architecture, but a much better flowing head, an intake manifold, they're fuel injected, and they make a bunch of torque. So the Jeep behind me is a YJ, you can see by the square headlights, but not a lot of those parts remain. Certainly not the puny axles or even the transfer case at this point. We're here today with Jason Roche, AKA Roach, and he is going to tell us all about his Jeep, La Cucarachón, which means roach in Spanish. So this is actually the second version of the Roach Coach. He's going to break down for us what his original Jeep had and how that was the inspiration for this vehicle behind us. When Jason Roche commissioned Dr. Smash to build this Jeep, he chose top-of-the-line components. So that's things like Dynatrac Pro Rock 60 axles, Genrite suspension, King coilovers, and of course, Nitto trail grapplers. Nitto makes tires in a variety of different tread patterns and different sizes for nearly any application, and what they all have in common is excellent tread life, great traction, they're quiet and smooth on the road, and they're tough as nails on the trail. So tell us about your love affair with YJs or the history there, Jason.
So in '96, my mom bought this. I learned how to drive a stick in this car. I got my first speeding ticket in this car.
Wow, you don't hear that every day in a YJ.
I got my first wreck out of Sand Mountain in this car.
Okay.
Learned a lot about how dunes are shaped. A few years back, I had another YJ that got stolen in the Bay Area, and I was planning to build another one, thinking a lot about what I wanted to use as a starting point. And I thought about doing a TJ, I thought about doing a JK, both were a little expensive as a starting point.
Yeah.
And my mom, she had already bought another car, so she wasn't driving it. She convinced me to take it from her, and I started thinking about all the things that needed to be replaced. I realized that all the mods I was gonna do to it would fix all the issues that it had already. So I agreed to it, and then took it up to Dr. Smash, and we basically cut it apart and rebuilt it almost from the ground up. The only stock components on it still are the engine that has 230,000 miles on it.
Wow.
And the AX15 transmission that still holds up like a champ. And I still haven't blown it up yet. It was a free platform to start with. It was leaf sprung, so I grappled with that a little bit, thought about a spring over, decided that I wanted a little bit more comfort, and then did some research and contacted the guys at Genrite. Tony Pellegrino spent probably an hour and a half to 2 hours on the phone with me, walking me through the different geometry options, the different materials, the different cost points, and just the attention that he gave me as a customer was the difference between, spending no money with them or buying the suspension kit, the roll cage, the fenders. I have a lot of respect for those guys. So I ended up going with the Genrite elite coilover kit, which was a lot of fabrication. So I enlisted the help from my friend Eric Bevins, Dr. Smash, and basically dropped it off at his shop and started cutting things off.
Right.
I could never run the Rubicon in my previous Jeep.
Right. It wouldn't be very fun.
Right. It would be an adventure, but not necessarily an enjoyable one. Decided to go with Dana 60s, and deciding between Curry and Dynatrac, looking at the size of the housing, I decided to go with the Pro Rock 60s because they have a lot smaller profile and a lot more clearance.
And I think that's really a compelling argument. I see people buy JKs and now even JLs, and they immediately put 1-tons in them and coilovers and the same things you have, but you're still making on a car payment on something, and then you drop a bunch of money, it adds up.
And it was an interesting experience starting from the ground up. So with this, we literally cut every bracket off down to the bare frame. So putting together a parts list and putting together a plan when you don't have pre-existing modifications to base it on, it was a very different experience than piecemealing it over the years.
Sure.
I like the width of the YJ. I like the length. A lot of people love to hate the gauge cluster. I actually really like the gauge cluster for its simplicity. It's not as minimalist as a CJ.
Right.
I do like that dash better, but it's just, it has really strong 80s, 90s vibes. That square padding and all the bolstering. I do like the square headlights. It's unique. I actually, when I was planning to build a YJ again, once I'd finally gotten to that point, I was considering starting with a Renegade or an Islander, just for the absurdity.
The Islander is okay. The Renegade with those fiberglass fenders are terrible. I think you would have just hit one on a rock and it would have exploded by now.
The Islander, I've always loved that splash paint theme.
So what are the things you didn't like about your last Jeep that you changed?
So the very first things that I started outlining on my list were everything that I'd broken before. So the Dana 30 in the front, it's a good enough axle except for the vacuum disconnect.
Right.
The vacuum diaphragm failed on mine, so I ended up using a mountain bike shifter to bypass it. And then the transfer case, it's not low enough. It was, the chain slipped a few times, and I had a major incident once where I sheared the shift fork clean off and the chain ate it up.
Oh.
So two-wheel drive for over a year because of that. Opened up the transfer case and it was aluminum sludge. The Dana 35 in the rear, I never had C-clip issues, but I know a couple people,
Right.
a couple mutual friends of ours have had C-clip failures. A couple were hilarious watching the wheel chase them down the hill. Pulled the rear yoke out of the transfer case a couple of times because the lift that they had done didn't include a slip yoke eliminator. So I ended up doing a slip yoke after that failure. But the 4-liter does great, the AX15 does great. So the drivetrain for the most part was worth saving. Everything from there back was replaced. I don't want it to be a trailer queen, so I do like the idea of keeping it so that I can, you know, run it out to the trail and then drive it home.
And I know you've lived in big cities and metropolitan areas. We're just outside Reno, Nevada right now, where both of us live, and it's an outdoorsman's paradise, quite honestly. I mean, there's trails all around here. Everything I have is plated for that same reason. I definitely think if you have in mind that you want to build a vehicle, starting with a YJ makes a lot of sense. They're stronger and better than CJs, they're less expensive than TJs, and by the time you buy a long arm kit and put coilovers on a TJ, you're going to spend just as much money as this anyway.
It's a good platform.
Absolutely. I definitely think that the 1-ton axles too are a good choice if you're going to run a 40-inch Nitto trail grappler on it. By the time you get to big boy tires, it's time for 1-ton axles. The brake assemblies, the knuckles, the ball joints, everything is bigger.
Right.
I used to laugh. People would say, oh, I got these long field axles and they're 30 spline. My Toyota axle is as strong as a Dana 60 now. No, that's not true. One part of your axle is as strong as one part of a stock Dana 60, and it's not the brakes, and it's not the hubs, and it's not the spindles, it's not the ball joints, it's not the ring gear. So there's no substitute for 1-ton axles. You had problems with stock transfer cases, so what does this have in it then instead of an MP231?
So this is running a 4-to-1 Advanced Adapters Atlas 2 transfer case. The Atlas 2 is a great transfer case. I have had one incident with this Jeep, and it was the rear yoke got ripped off the transfer case because I had overloaded it.
Oh, wow.
But that's a testament to having a known weak spot.
And I like the 231s, but by the time you do a slip yoke eliminator and a 4-to-1 kit, and you still don't have the ability to front dig, and you're close to the price of an Atlas.
And you still have a vacuum selector. You know, I have had one incident at the Rubicon. Last time I went to the Rubicon, it was overloaded. We had all of our camping gear in here, bounced it a little too aggressively and sheared the yoke right off the back of the Atlas. Ended up camping down at the lake for a few days, which was actually pretty great, and then drove all the way back from Ice House Road to Carson City in front-wheel drive, which was an experience.
Luckily, you've got selectable options, I see, so
yeah.
That would have been even more of an experience, I imagine, if you had
oh yeah,
a spool or a...
Yeah, it has 1350 U-joints now.
Okay, so maybe at 1310 when you started.
Yeah.
And that's another example of matching parts, right? 1310 U-joints are great when you've got, like you're saying, an 8.8 and a Wagoneer 44 and maybe 35s or 37s, but...
And luckily, with the stock engine and transmission, it doesn't have a whole lot of power. It has enough to get the job done, but it's not enough to break parts every weekend.
Sure.
This is my first time getting 40s, so did a bunch of research. Nitto really had what I was looking for. They had robust sidewalls, the tread pattern works really well, looks really cool. If you're into it, the reversible lettering is kind of an interesting feature. They were a great price point, quality tire. I've put them through hell and they handle it perfectly.
Hi guys, this is Mike. I'm the guy behind the camera for all these hairy situations videos. Just wanted to give a quick shout out to Spider Tracks. Sorry for the typo in the on-screen text in our last episode. Spider Tracks is a company that fabricates high-end axle parts and wheel spacers for enthusiasts and professionals in Loveland, Colorado. All right, let's finish off that road.
Now that is not easy. That is not an easy obstacle. I have to winch about 50% of the time that I do this obstacle. Jason had to take a few stabs at it, but he hasn't run this trail before and he went right up that. I was impressed. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed that we gave the YJ a little love. We're not just doing walk-around videos here, we're actually taking these things out and using them. Comment below and let us know what you want to see next.